The winter wind cut through the Boston streets like a cold razor, sharp and unforgiving. Snow drifted down in thick, quiet layers, covering the sidewalks and muffling the distant sounds of traffic. At the corner bus stop, under a flickering street lamp, Emily Brooks sat curled on a metal bench, hugging her thin hospital jacket around her shoulders. It had been a brutally long shift. 12 hours of nonstop emergencies, short staffing, and running on coffee that tasted like burnt plastic. But none of that compared to the heartbreaking, almost humiliating moment when the manager of the nurse's residence told her she had to leave. Late payment, no exceptions. Now she had nowhere to go, no family nearby, no savings left after months of trying to keep herself afloat. Her fingers were numb. Her cheeks stung from the icy air. She tried to keep her breathing steady, whispering to herself like she often did when things got rough. Just make it through the night, Em. Morning always comes. But tonight the world felt unusually large, and she felt painfully small. The snow kept falling. Then through the white haze, a pair of headlights pierced the darkness. A sleek black SUV slowed as it approached the bus stop. Tires crunched against fresh snow. The engine hummed softly, warm, expensive, out of place in this fragile, vulnerable corner of the night. The tinted window in the back rolled down. A little girl with golden brown curls and big curious eyes pressed her mittened hand to the glass. "Daddy, she looks cold." Inside, Ethan Walker, a composed but exhausted single father, glanced from his daughter to the shivering woman on the bench. His jaw tightened. He wasn't the kind of man who stopped for strangers. Not anymore. Not since life had taught him how quickly people could disappear. But something about Emily, maybe the way her shoulders trembled, maybe the tender, quiet look in her eyes, pulled at a place in him he thought had frozen over long ago. The SUV rolled to a stop. Ethan stepped out, the warm air from the car spilling into the icy night as he approached her. "Miss, you can't stay out here. You'll freeze." Emily looked up, startled, unsure whether to trust him. Then the little girl's voice drifted from the back seat, soft, sincere, comforting. "Please, let's help her." And in that gentle, innocent plea, everything in Emily's life shifted. Emily hesitated for a moment, her breath forming shaky clouds in the cold air. Something inside her whispered to stay cautious. But the truth was, she was too cold, too tired, too shaken to keep pretending she was fine. When Ethan opened the SUV door, a wave of warm air brushed against her face, almost comforting, almost enough to make her cry. She stepped in. Lily immediately scooted closer, her little boots tapping against the leather seats. "Hi," the girl said softly, her voice gentle and genuinely curious. "I'm Lily." Emily mustered a small, grateful smile. "I'm Emily." The SUV pulled away from the curb. For a moment, no one spoke. The quiet felt weirdly safe, like the calm after a storm. Emily stared down at her hands, still red from the cold, while Lily kept stealing innocent glances at her, as if making sure she was really okay. Ethan adjusted the heater, his tone low but sincere. "We're not far. There's a decent hotel nearby. I can drop you off there." Emily nodded, though a knot of unease tightened in her chest. She had barely enough money for a single night, and definitely not enough for tomorrow. But before she could say a word, Lily leaned forward, studying her with those warm, hopeful eyes. "Daddy, can she stay with us? Just until she gets warm?" Ethan let out a slow breath, caught between logic and his daughter's tender instinct. Then he met Emily's eyes in the rearview mirror. Something unspoken passed between them. Something fragile but real. He turned left instead of right. Not toward the hotel, but toward home. And Emily, sitting in the soft glow of the car's lights, realized this wasn't just a ride anymore. It was the beginning of something she didn't have a name for yet. The SUV turned into a quiet suburban neighborhood, lined with snow-covered lawns and dim porch lights. Emily watched from the back seat, feeling both grateful and strangely uneasy. She hadn't expected to be taken anywhere except the nearest hotel. And she definitely hadn't expected a man like Ethan Walker, calm, self-contained, a little distant, to bring her to his own home. When the garage door opened, warm light spilled across the driveway. Lily practically hopped out of the car, grabbing Emily's hand with a tender, fearless trust only children possess. "Come on," she said. "You're freezing." Inside, the house was spotless, almost too spotless. High ceilings, gray walls, polished floors that echoed with each step. Everything looked expensive, but also quiet, almost emotionally empty, like someone had erased all signs of life. Emily took in the lack of photos, the absence of toys, the rigid line of furniture arranged perfectly but without warmth. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Ethan set his keys down, his expression hesitant, almost apologetic. "It wasn't always this formal. My wife, she loved color, laughed a lot. Lily and I, we're still figuring things out." There was a vulnerability in his voice that caught Emily off guard. Before she could respond, Lily tugged at her sleeve. "Can you read me a bedtime story, please?" Emily glanced at Ethan for permission. He gave a small nod, one that carried more emotion than words could hold. Upstairs, Lily's room was the only warm place in the house. Soft pink bedding, fairy lights, stuffed animals arranged in cozy clusters. A small sanctuary. Emily sat beside Lily, reading softly while the little girl's eyelids grew heavy. When Lily finally drifted off, her tiny hand still holding Emily's sweater, Emily felt something unexpected bloom in her chest. Something soft, heartfelt, and deeply dangerous. Because this house, cold as it was beginning to feel less lonely. Emily woke earlier than she meant to. For a moment she forgot where she was. The soft hum of the heater, the faint smell of fresh coffee drifting down the hall, the quiet stillness of a house much larger than anything she'd ever lived in. Then it came back to her. Ethan's home. Lily's laughter from last night. The fragile, unexpected sense of safety she felt. She wrapped herself in the guest blanket and stepped into the hallway, unsure whether she should stay hidden or help out. But when she reached the kitchen, she froze. Lily was sitting at the island, kicking her little feet, while Ethan tried, unsuccessfully, to braid her hair. The braid was crooked, loose, leaning dangerously to the side. "Daddy," Lily sighed dramatically, "this is a disaster." Ethan lifted his hands in defeat. "I'm better with spreadsheets." Emily couldn't help a small, warm laugh. "Here, may I?" Lily lit up instantly. "Please." Emily moved behind her, fingers gentle as she brushed through the curls. The moment felt intimate, strangely natural, as though she'd done it 100 times. Ethan leaned on the counter, watching with an expression somewhere between admiration and a quiet longing he didn't fully understand. When breakfast was ready, Emily hesitated to sit, unsure of boundaries. Ethan noticed and pulled out a chair for her. "You're welcome to eat with us," he said, voice sincere, almost soft. "You're not a guest. At least, not in that distant way." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. They ate together, simple eggs and toast, but somehow warmer than any meal she'd had in months. Lily told stories about school. Ethan listened with subtle pride. Emily found herself smiling more than she realized. It was an ordinary morning, a small one, but for all three of them, it planted a hopeful, dangerous seed of what life could look like. That evening, after Lily fell asleep with her favorite stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm, the house settled into a quiet, almost fragile calm. Emily stepped out of the bedroom, pulling the door closed with a gentle click. She expected to head straight to the guest room, keep her distance, stay respectful. But Ethan was waiting at the end of the hallway. He stood with his hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly tense, as if unsure whether to speak or walk away. "Emily," he began, voice hesitant, "would you join me downstairs for a minute?" She nodded, though her heartbeat quickened in a way she didn't fully understand. Downstairs, the dining room had changed. The overhead lights were turned off, replaced by the soft flicker of 2 candles on the table. A small Bluetooth speaker played a tender, nostalgic jazz tune. Nothing fancy, but warm, comforting, human. Emily blinked, surprised. "I figured you deserved something nice," Ethan said quietly. "You've been helping us more than you realize." They sat eating simple crackers and cheese, but the moment felt bigger than the food. It felt like a doorway, one he was finally brave enough to open. After a long pause, Ethan exhaled a breath he'd been holding for years. "My wife, Anna, she died trying to help someone. A car crash. Lily was 3. His voice cracked in a way he quickly tried to hide. "I've been frozen since then, just trying to survive." Emily listened, her eyes soft with warm-hearted compassion. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "No one should have to carry that alone." For the first time, Ethan met her gaze without armor. Open, vulnerable, aching yet hopeful. Maybe, he said, I'm finally ready to feel something again. And in that small candlelit room, both of them understood that life had just shifted, quietly but unmistakably. Later that night, the house was wrapped in a soft, sleepy stillness. Emily had just settled into the guest room when a faint, trembling sound cut through the quiet, a child's cry. Instinct kicked in. She hurried down the hall and pushed open Lily's bedroom door. Lily sat upright in bed, clutching her stuffed rabbit, tears streaking her cheeks. Hey, sweetheart, Emily whispered, rushing to her side. It's okay, I'm right here. The little girl collapsed into her arms, shaking. The moment Emily held her, Lily let out a raw, aching sob, the kind that came from somewhere deep. Don't go, she cried. Please, Mommy, don't go. Emily froze. Not because the word hurt, but because it filled her with something terrifyingly tender, a love she didn't expect to feel this soon. She wrapped Lily tighter, rocking her gently, whispering soft, comforting words until the little girl's breathing slowed. Neither noticed Ethan standing in the doorway. He had come running at the sound of crying, but the scene before him rooted him to the floor. His daughter, his whole world, clinging to Emily, calling her Mommy. His chest tightened with emotions he couldn't untangle. Fear, longing, guilt, hope. Emily finally looked up, startled to find him there. Ethan's expression was unreadable, fragile, almost haunted. I didn't mean, she started. But Ethan stepped back, walls slamming up behind his eyes. I know, he said quietly, voice tight. It's late. You should rest. He turned and walked away before she could say another word. And for the first time since she arrived, the house didn't feel warm anymore. It felt vulnerable, unsteady, like something precious was about to crack. The next morning, Emily woke to a silence that felt different, distant, almost cold. When she stepped into the hallway, the smell of fresh coffee was gone. The kitchen, usually full of little sounds, Lily humming, Ethan moving around gently, was still and uneasy. Ethan sat at the table, reading emails on his laptop, posture stiff. He glanced up when Emily entered, offering a polite nod. Not warm, not hostile, just hollow. Morning, she said softly. Morning, he replied, without looking long enough for her to read his face. Lily came down a minute later, sleepy but cheerful, hugging Emily's leg like nothing had changed. Emily's heart pulled tight. Ethan noticed, then quickly looked away, his jaw tense. Breakfast passed with small talk, thin, careful, hesitant. Ethan didn't ask about her sleep, didn't meet her eyes, didn't linger like before. Every gesture felt measured, as if he were afraid to cross some invisible line. Emily washed dishes afterward, trying to shake the heavy feeling in her chest. He's pulling back. She knew the signs. Distance was its own kind of language, one she'd learned too well in her life. Later, when Lily reached for Emily's hand on the way to school, Ethan subtly stepped between them, guiding Lily to the other side. Not harshly, just enough to sting. Emily felt it like a bruise blooming inside her. That night, the house remained painfully quiet. Ethan stayed in his office, Lily colored alone at the coffee table, and Emily sat in the guest room wondering when something so warm had become so conflicted. The worst part wasn't his silence, it was knowing why. That single word Lily whispered in her sleep, Mommy, had reopened a wound Ethan wasn't ready to face. And the more he tried to protect himself from the past, the more he was breaking the present. The tension in the house didn't fade. It grew. Day by day, Ethan became more quiet, more distant, retreating behind his work emails and long phone calls. The warmth Emily helped build seemed to drain from the walls, leaving behind a kind of aching emptiness she couldn't ignore. One evening, Ethan returned home late, the winter air clinging to his coat. Emily was in the living room helping Lily with a puzzle. Lily's face lit up the second she saw her father. Daddy, look, Emily helped me finish the snowman. Ethan forced a small smile. That's great, kiddo. But his eyes flickered, just briefly, toward Emily, and she saw it. The conflict, the fear, the unresolved grief, and something cold settled in her stomach. Later, after Lily went to bed, Emily finally gathered the courage to speak. Ethan, have I done something wrong? He paused, shoulders tense. No, you haven't. Then why does it feel like you're avoiding me? His silence was heavy, harsh, almost suffocating. It's not about you, he said at last. I can't let things get complicated. The words cut deeper than he meant them to. Complicated? Emily repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan, I care about Lily, and I care about this family. Whatever this is becoming. Ethan looked away, jaw tight, guarded. That's exactly what scares me. It was the truest thing he'd said, and the most wounded, too. Emily swallowed hard, feeling something inside her crack. Maybe I shouldn't stay here anymore. Ethan didn't protest, didn't reach for her, didn't say a single word. And that silence, sharp, painful, vulnerable, told her everything she needed to know. For the first time since she stepped into this house, Emily felt like a stranger again. Emily didn't pack right away. She tried to convince herself that maybe Ethan just needed time, that maybe silence was his way of protecting old wounds. But the next few days only grew heavier, each moment filled with a quiet tension that made the house feel smaller and her heart feel painfully tight. Then came the company's annual winter gala. Ethan insisted she attend, saying it would look better if Lily had someone familiar nearby. The words stung, but she went, not for him, but for the little girl who trusted her with her whole heart. The ballroom was bright, elegant, glittering with gold accents and polished laughter. Emily felt exposed in her simple navy dress, but Lily held her hand proudly. At first, everything seemed fine, until she overheard two executives whispering near the punch table. That's her? The nurse? Hmm. No family name, no status. Convenient, isn't it? A single dad brings home an employee, lets his kid call her mommy. Trying to secure her place, maybe? The words hit her like ice water. Emily's breath faltered. Her cheeks burned with humiliation, though she did nothing wrong. She turned toward Ethan, silently pleading for him to say something. Anything. But Ethan heard them too, and looked away. He didn't defend her, didn't correct them, didn't protect her from the cruel assumptions. The silence between them, once fragile, now felt cold, deliberate, devastating. That night when they returned home, Emily waited until the house was quiet. Then she folded her clothes, placed them gently in her worn bag, and laid the scarf he once gave her on his desk. Beside it, she left a handwritten note. Thank you for the days you made me feel like I mattered. Please take care of Lily. She has the kindest heart I've ever known. Her hands trembled as she set it down. Leaving didn't break her. Realizing she was no longer welcome, that was the part that felt heartbreaking. Ethan didn't notice Emily was gone until the house felt too quiet, too empty. Lily's backpack lay by the door, her crayons scattered on the rug, but the warmth Emily brought into their home had vanished like breath on a cold window. He found the scarf first, then the letter. By the time he finished reading it, his chest felt tight, his vision blurred. He wanted to run after her, call her, apologize, but he had no idea where she went. And before he could process the ache in his throat, a chilling realization struck him. The house was silent, too silent. Lily, he called out, no answer. His pulse spiked. He checked her room, empty. Then the living room, the kitchen, the hallway, nothing. Panic hit him like a punch. He threw on his coat and yanked open the front door, and froze. It was cracked open. Snow had blown inside, leaving a thin, icy trail along the hardwood floor. His heart dropped to his stomach. Lily, he shouted, voice breaking as he stumbled outside. The storm was brutal, wind whipping harshly, snow falling in wild, blinding sheets. Ethan sprinted down the street, slipping on ice, calling his daughter's name until his throat burned. Neighbors opened curtains, shaken by the sound, but no one had seen a little girl in a red coat. Every terrifying possibility flashed through his mind. Not again. Not another person he loved disappearing into the cold. His breath turned sharp, frantic, desperate. He reached the corner and nearly collapsed to his knees, whispering into the wind. Please, not my daughter, not my little girl. And then, a flicker. A small red shape curled on a bus stop bench a block away. Ethan ran, stumbling through the snow, hope and terror tangled in every trembling step. Because if he didn't reach her in time, he knew he would never forgive himself. Ethan's boots slipped across the icy sidewalk as he sprinted toward the bus stop, breath coming out in panicked, uneven bursts. The closer he got, the clearer the small figure became. A little girl curled tightly into herself, her red coat dusted with thick snow. Lily, he shouted, voice raw. Her head lifted slowly, eyes glassy and frightened. "Daddy," she whispered, trembling. He fell to his knees beside her, pulling her into his arms with a desperate force that came from pure terror. "Oh God, sweetheart, what were you thinking?" I, I wanted to find Mommy Emily," she choked out between sobs. "She left because of me. I didn't want her to be alone." The words sliced straight through Ethan's chest. Before he could respond, another voice pierced the storm. "Lily!" Emily. She came running from across the street, coat flapping behind her, hair dusted with snow, eyes wide with panic and relief. She dropped into the snow next to them, arms wrapping around Lily the second she reached her. "Baby, you scared me," Emily whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere." Lily clung to her fiercely, her small body shaking. Ethan watched, breathless, overwhelmed by the sight, his daughter safe in the arms of the woman he'd pushed away. When Emily finally looked up, their eyes met. For the first time since she left, there wasn't anger or hesitation, only a fragile, aching tenderness between them. Ethan swallowed hard, snow melting on his lashes. "Emily, I'm sorry," he said, voice breaking. "I should have fought for you. For us. I was scared, too scared to admit how much you mean to both of us." Emily held Lily closer, her own breath unsteady. "Ethan, you hurt me," she whispered, "but I never wanted to leave you." The three of them stayed there, huddled together in the falling snow, until the storm felt less harsh and the world felt a little safer. Because for the first time they weren't standing apart. The snow had begun to settle by the time Ethan, Emily, and Lily reached the front steps of the house. Their clothes were soaked, their breaths cloudy in the cold air. But for the first time in weeks, the silence between them wasn't painful. It was gentle, full of what they didn't know how to say yet. Inside, Ethan wrapped Lily in a blanket and gave her a cup of warm cocoa. She curled into Emily's side, exhausted but safe. Emily stroked the girl's hair, her touch tender, calming the last of Lily's trembling. Ethan watched them, two people he loved in different but deeply connected ways. And he finally understood something. His fear wasn't protecting anyone. It was only keeping the people he needed most at arm's length. After putting Lily to bed, he found Emily in the living room, staring at the quiet glow of the fireplace. Snowflakes drifted past the window like tiny floating sparks. "Emily," he said softly. She turned cautious but still open, her eyes warm yet hesitant. Ethan took a slow breath, the kind you take before saying something that might change everything. "I should have defended you. At the gala. At home. Everywhere. I let my past control me, and it hurt you. It hurt Lily. And I'm sorry. Truly." Her eyes softened, breaking just a little. "Ethan, I never wanted you to forget your wife. I just wanted a place where I wasn't treated like a mistake." "You were never a mistake," he said, this time without hesitation. "You're the first good thing that's happened to us in a long time." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. Simple, worn, meaningful. Emily gasped softly as he opened it. Inside was a delicate gold ring engraved with 4 new words. "A new home begins here." "This isn't about replacing the past," Ethan said, voice vulnerable but steady. "It's about building a future. With you. With Lily. Not for a night. Not for a season. For real." Emily's breath caught somewhere between joy and fear. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming sense of finally belonging. She placed her hand over his. "Ethan, I'm already home." He pulled her into his arms, holding her against his chest, the moment heartfelt and whole. In the hallway, Lily peeked out, beaming sleepy and bright before running toward them. The three of them, shivering, laughing, crying, held each other tightly as the storm outside softened into a peaceful winter hush. 1 year later, their home glowed with life. Finger paintings covered the fridge. Lily's giggles echoed down the hallway. Emily, now Emily Walker, became head nurse at the community health center Ethan built in her honor. And on Christmas Eve, as they decorated the tree, Lily hung a small ornament that read, "Our second chance." Their story wasn't perfect. Life never is. But it was real, warm, hopeful, and beautifully theirs. Now I want to ask you, if you were in Ethan's place, would you have had the courage to open your heart again? And if you were Emily, would you stay, even after being hurt? Tell me your thoughts. I'd love to hear what you felt during this journey. If this story touched you, don't forget, Subscribe now for more heartfelt, emotional stories like this. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need a little hope. Thank you for staying until the end. Here's to second chances, warmer homes, and love that chooses you.